Hello and welcome to Monday Hurling Show here. Don't really want to be here after the weekend that was, especially the result on Sunday as Tipperary got fairly pasted by Limerick, I think it's fair to say. Michael Verney, we're brought to you here by orgaretro.com. If you want to get the big winners of the weekend, this Waterford jersey, the Galway jersey that Michael Verney is wearing, go to orgaretro.com, put in the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off any jersey you want there. They're all very slick. So just to quickly run over the results from the weekend. On Saturday, Kilkenny beat Dublin 320 to 222. That was very close. Galway, they fairly dismissed Wexford 127 to 17 points. Waterford, they were winners over Cork. I tipped it. Actually, I tipped every result. No big deal. And Limerick beat Tipperary 323 to 217. Now, I was thinking, right, Tipperary have a right chance here against Limerick. 50-50 sort of game. There'll be a puck of a ball in it. But once that team was announced, I think there was a lot of people in Tipperary a little bit kind of concerned. And it was summed up in a tweet that came in from at Twice as Nice 97. He goes, Liam Sheedy's selection of Mark Yo and Jake Morris ahead of Dan Breen and McCormack could indicate a bit of wishful thinking on Sheedy's part, but more concerning for Tipp. It could suggest Tipp's backs were being skinned in training and the wrong message was being taken from that. So if we drill down a little bit deeper, Tipperary went for probably a lot of fine hurlers, but not necessarily battlers, because Dan McCormack came in and it was immediately obvious that the man should have started, because just his ability to come in and win dirty ball, get it into his hand instantly, win a couple of frees. I think some of the size profile of those Tipperary players like Ford, Keogh, Morris, even Alan Flynn going in midfield, Sean O'Brien going cornerback. There was an awful lot of players that against, the land of the giants that is Limerick, they're going to be to some degree under an awful lot of pressure.
First things first, just like to let all our viewers know, I had to ring the man 10 times this morning to get him out of bed to actually talk about this game. He had absolutely no idea. He was like, we'll do it later. I says, no, we'll do it now while it's nice and fresh and painful. To be honest with you, Shane, this was very reminiscent of when Tipp played Limerick in 2018. I thought it was not a 50-50 game. I would have said 55-45 Limerick. When I saw the team was announced, I couldn't see Limerick being beaten, to be honest with you. Dan McCormack, to me, is absolutely tailor-made for Limerick. He's tailor-made for them. I don't know if the Bonner Matter is carrying a knock or not, but he wasn't in the 26. To be honest, someone like him would have been tailor-made for Limerick too, in my view. And when I saw the team went to it more, I'm not saying, I just think he went to it maybe some more kind of dandy hurlers, maybe than, that brute, raw physical force that some of the players I mentioned there would offer. But just reading Brendan Cummins this morning in the Independent, it does look like that Limerick are Tipperary's kryptonite. It's funny, different teams, and like we talk about even in MMA or in boxing, that styles make fights. Limerick's style and their style of play and how physical they are and how much they pack their defence and pack that middle third just doesn't seem to suit Tipp. Funny enough, Cork, who were like blown away at the weekend in many respects by Waterford, they don't match up well for Limerick either. Like, it's funny, just different teams don't match up well. But serious statement from Limerick, and an absolute masterclass as well. We talked about last week, I thought it was very funny actually, that we talked about even that we know what Limerick are going to do. We know exactly what they're going to do, what way they're going to play. And then all of a sudden Kyle Hayes is wing back, and Darragh Donovan moves to midfield, and Keane Lynch goes to centre forward, and there's like three fundamental changes. Alan Flynn was brought in to solely mark Keane Lynch, and all of a sudden Keane Lynch is centre forward and absolutely directing affairs from there. Kyle Hayes obviously dropped back in defence last year in the All-Ireland semi-final when they're in a bit of trouble, but I don't think anybody expected him to start wing back the other day. And while I talked about last week that their players in the full back line mightn't be that versatile, the rest of the team is so versatile and it's almost interchangeable at times. And you could see, I suppose, those changes and just keeping things fresh. You could see what it meant to John Kiley afterwards. I never really seen him like that. It's almost like, he had Paul Kinnerk, and he was almost like fist bumping into him. That's how much it meant to them. It was a bit of a masterclass from Limerick in all fairness.
It was, yeah, and I had plenty of people kind of tweeting me a bit of jip after the game, saying that this proved that Tipperary's All-Ireland last year was a bit of a fluke and all this kind of stuff, because Limerick had essentially, been beaten by somebody else, and that, like you were saying, Limerick being kryptonite for Tipperary, that if they had to meet them in the All-Ireland final, that, they wouldn't have come near them. Fair enough, that may be the point, but one thing I would say is it was evident after 10 minutes that, like 8 minutes, that Limerick were going to win this game. There were 6 points to 1 up, and obviously Tipp made a bit of a burst then, getting the next 3 points, and then that goal came from Jake Morris, which put Tipperary just a point behind at 9 points to 1-5, and it was a glorious goal. What Seamus Callanan did in terms of, like, first of all, Tipperary had won a turnover. I think Declan Hannon might have been turned over. Callanan got the ball, and I mean most other players would have thrown that over, and he just saw Jake Morris inside, and the flick off the stick was just, it was a thing of wonder, especially in those conditions. And for Jake Morris to actually have the wherewithal to know that behind him was Darragh O'Donovan, so he cocked the hurley and then he let it go and then he whipped it in. It was beautiful, but just the comeback straight away, they can see the goal, and Aaron Gillan is putting the ball in the net just seconds later. The way
Rona Matters hurling his hand.
Yeah, that was mad, and the sort of laugh between them after that. But it wasn't funny for Tipperary. That backline was under so much pressure, and like apparently afterwards, it was explained that Paddy Maher hadn't trained for 3 weeks coming into this game, and I think that very much told in his performance. He wasn't really on the ball at all. You normally see him flying out. I think
he missed more time yesterday off the field, Shane, than he probably in his whole Tipp career, I'd say, yesterday.
Yeah, wasn't the stat last year that he'd missed something like 10 minutes out of the last 10 years of the Hurling Championship? But if you go through that backline, they were in awful bother. I mean, Rona Maher was in a bit of trouble. Cathal Barrett was actually brilliant for Tipperary. Otherwise, the backline people were marked absence. I mean, Sean O'Brien was under an awful lot of pressure, and it's a fact in the full backline you need to be so tidy on the ball. And I know the conditions were terrible, and it's the first game out for Tipperary and all that, and maybe I'm making excuses to some degree, but it's hard to see Tipp coming back from this because of the manner of it. But you know, Sean O'Brien was struggling with his handling. Paddy Maher was. Brendan Maher was fairly quiet. Barry Heffernan came off injured, holding his hamstring. That's a massive one. Putting Alan Flynn, he ended up basically centre back on Keane Lynch. There's one thing making sure you man mark opposition's key players, but what turned out was the way Limerick rejigged, they actually put Tipperary very much on the backward foot by putting guys in unusual positions. I don't think Tipperary want a smaller back as their centre back. You know, you want a fairly dominant back, so it is always a balance.
How smart was that though, Shane? How smart was that? To put him in there, they probably knew from a week out that he was going to be man-marked. Put him in there, and like that's just so uncomfortable for Tipperary. And I'm sure when they see Keane Lynch going centre forward, they're like, what are we going to do? Are we going to leave Flynn midfield, or are we going to put him centre back? And then it's such a fundamental shift. I thought that was very, very smart manipulation by Cody and Connacht, I have to say.
Yeah, there's no doubt there. And like the Tipperary forward line was. It was struggling to win ball. It was poor forward line. Like I know I mentioned Seamus Callanan setting up that goal and probably starved of ball in good positions, but he didn't score. Mark Keogh didn't score, and I mean there was a point there in the second half where Tipperary had made a bit of a burst, and just even looking at it here, it was back to 6 points. Jason Ford had knocked over 3 frees. Again, Tipperary weren't exactly knocking them over from play, and I think if you're relying hugely on frees and frees alone, unless you're like soloing up the centre and you keep getting pulled down, that's fair enough. That might be a sign that yes, we're getting back on top, we're winning ball, we're on the front foot. But Tipperary weren't massively. You know, they got those 3 points on the spin and almost felt like, right, maybe something could happen here. Mark Keogh did probably 20-30 yard solo, and he actually just spilled the ball under no pressure whatsoever. Goes up the other end, and Aaron Gillan knocks over a free. So what could be 5 points goes back out to 7 points again. And it was just like that for Tipp all day. Ended up losing by 9 points, 323 to 217. And I think, you know, it could have ended up being a defeat by just 5 or 6 points. But I think for Tipperary really to sort of ram home to them that, you know, we really have an awful lot to do here. We need to do a bit of soul searching. We need an awful lot more fire in the bellies. I think it's nearly good that Seamus Flanagan's ball sort of skidded off his hurley and went into the top corner, because you don't want to come away from this thinking we're not too far away. You want to come away with sort of a rocket up to you to think we need to really rejig here and really rethink how we're doing things, because you're coming away and pretty much Cathal Barrett has done well, Noel McGrath has done alright, but other than that there's not a huge pile to take from it.
Yeah, this is a new territory though, Shane. This is what.
You're loving this, aren't you? You are loving this.
Oh no! I'm actually going to make a different point. Actually, no. Well, a part of me is loving it. I'm not going to lie. And the fact I think that I thought Limerick were the best team last year, and I think they'll win the All Ireland this year. Part of me is loving it, but it's definitely not new territory for Sheedy. If you look at it, he's obviously been manager for 2 All-Ireland wins, 2010 and 2019, and they shipped a massive defeat in both of those years. So I think it was 3-15 to 14 points against Cork. When Azaki absolutely went to town, and then they were beaten 12 points last year by Limerick in the Munster final, and yet they won an All-Ireland by, I can't even remember the score, I'm going to say about 15 points or whatever it was in the end. So there's no, fair enough, they've shipped a heavy defeat, but there's absolutely no reason to suggest that they can't bounce back, that they won't get their best 15 back out in the pitch, that Limerick having a game under their belts was an advantage. It wasn't that as massive an advantage as 9 points or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no reason to suggest that Tipp won't bounce back. And while everybody is talking up probably Galway after the weekend, there's no reason in my head to suggest that Tipperary wouldn't get back to an All-Ireland final or meet Limerick at the knockout stages again. Providing, now, look, if you look at 2010, the defeat against Cork, they learned an awful lot from that, rejigged their team, even throughout the qualifiers. 2019, Munster final, they learned so much from that Munster final and rejigged their team and found their best team. Now they need to realise probably the errors of their way and find their best team again.
But why do we need to learn the hard way? Last year, the Munster final, you saw that team and, it didn't make sense to me at the time. We had a full back line that just made no sense. We had players that I just didn't understand. And we've already named them from the top here. But when that Tipperary team was announced on Friday night, the county collectively went, really? Are we going to go in with tasty hurlers and smaller profile size hurlers against Limerick of all teams, a team that will eat you alive? So why do you have to learn the hard way here? Do we really need to see that happen before you realise Dan McCormick starts in that game? There are other games, maybe when the weather is at, when the sun is splitting the rocks and it's the top of the summer, that you can throw all those players in and say, right, we'll keep Dan McCormick if we need to. But it's pretty obvious there. Bonner Maher, I presume, is injured. Maybe he's not absolutely flying either because, he had the cruciate last year, and I even watched the B county final this year and he didn't set the world alight. So maybe he's not absolutely flying yet. We'll have to see. I think John Maher had a bit of a baptism of fire. I was sort of thinking he might get sprung, and he ended up even in a cornerback position, got turned badly a couple of times. But it's the first day out for him. The ship was fairly sinking at that stage, so that was tough on him. Michael,
were you surprised by the Tipp bench as well when you went through it? I thought it was a lot of lighter profile type of players. I have to say I was surprised by that too.
Yeah, do you have them named there, or? I remember just looking at it. Shane Brophy had it up there. I think it was Sunday morning. Just even like the likes of Robert Byrne and these guys. And Craig Morgan actually wasn't on the 26th, which I was surprised about because I'd heard he'd been going well. But there was a lot of lighter profile players. This is a different, Winter Championship is just so much different. It's so much different. I just think the likes of, as I said, we're not privy to how the likes of Bonner and that are going, but Dan McCormick just even stood out a mile apart why he wasn't playing. Like
Michael Breen as well, yeah.
No, he lost the first two balls, like Diarmuid Burns, who was absolutely brilliant, snapped one over him, and then Breen lost another ball. But it's pretty obvious that his physicality would be of value here. Where you play him is the next thing, and that's a big issue for Tipperary now. It's 9 days before Seamus Kennedy is going to be back in full training, according to Liam Sheedy. Will Paddy Maher be right? After another week or two's training, is Barry Heffernan going to be okay to come back in, because he's very quickly established himself as a key part of that Tipperary backline. Tipperary need a backline full of lads who are 6 foot, powerful, to be able to compete with Limerick. And that's definitely going to be a bit of an issue going forward, unless they get everyone right quickly and somehow get through whatever the first qualifier round is. We've seen this morning, and we've done a separate video which you can look up. It's going to be Clare against Laois, it's going to be Dublin against Cork, and then there'll be an open draw in the next round of the qualifiers. We probably haven't talked enough about how good Limerick are, because they're absolutely sensational. You go through the players on the team that got the scores. Diarmuid Burns, as I said, he was class. He got 3 points, 2 from frees. Will O'Donoghue got a couple. Groder, Hegarty, Keane Lynch, 2 points each. Same with Tom Morrissey. Graham Mulcahy with 2. I mean, this is a recurring team. 2 points for this lad. Aaron Gallan with 1-6, and Peter Casey and David Reedy with 1. Seamus Flanagan comes on and gets 1-1. Pat Ryan with a point. So you've so many lads that are scoring, contributing, but not just that. He picked off a point here. No, these guys were a recurring kind of issue for Tipperary throughout the game. And having Aaron Gallan as that focal point in the attack, the way that Limerick worked the ball around the middle And like in those wintry conditions, it wasn't all. Do you remember when we were watching Limerick against Galway in the Gaelic grounds at the start of the year? It would be someone who come out with a full back line, or from just beyond the 21, that hit a stick pass to Keane Lynch, and he'd turn, he'd pop it off to someone else, and they'd sprint forward 20 yards and deliver it. There was an awful lot more hand passing here, because and rightly so, because it's not the weather for stick passing really. It was a monsoon and so different from Saturday's games, but they were just hand passing to each other all the time. They're so instinctive with it. The athleticism, the speed, they're so well coached, the way they keep moving off each other. And then Tipperary were drawn out towards the middle, and it was just lambs to the slaughter in that full back line. I felt very sorry for the guys playing back in there, but no better full forward line than Limerick's to make you pay.
No, it's funny as well because they had no problem putting in a long ball as well after a couple of hand passes. Once that kind of middle third was gone very congested, they realised, okay, there's nobody back here all of a sudden. Then all of a sudden the long ball goes in. You could see Graham Mulcahy in at the edge of play, maybe around the half forward line, and maybe getting a hand pass and recycling it backwards. Then all of a sudden the ball goes in over that area and Graham Mulcahy is in on the edge of it. We've talked about before the outball of having Galan with a hand at the edge of the square. It's just such a good, like, the ball he caught over Ronan Matters, it's a joke. Like you shouldn't be able to do that really. What he's able to do, and it's such a good outball. It makes him. That's why he is upper echelon of attackers. He can do it all out in front. He can do all that lovely stuff. But at the end of the day, when the ball needs to be won, a la a TJ or one of these type of characters, he's able to do it as well. And yeah, it looked very ominous. It looked very ominous for everybody else yesterday.
Limerick are sensational. And it's not that, like, Tipperary should have been able to find weaknesses in that Limerick team. You're talking about two-thirds of the full back line are guys that don't natively play in that position. Kyle Hayes, we know he's played centre-back under 21, but he's coming into wing-back, having played centre-forward for a couple of years for the senior side, albeit that cameo in the half-back line last year in the All-Ireland semi-final. Tipperary should have been able to find some weaknesses back there. The fact that it was a dirty day and Limerick are such powerful, they're such animals, maybe that fed into what happened there. But there's no doubting who was the better team. Just in terms of will there be any issues that will come home to roost for Limerick? Barry Nash in cornerback, he'd given away 3 frees inside the first 27 minutes. So maybe that's something that they'd look at. But it's not like he had a bad performance or I'm taking any pop at him. He was very good. Or he was pretty good at the very least. I don't think Dan Morrissey was in too much bother back there. In the first half, can you believe it that Tipperary only created 11 scoring opportunities, whereas it was 25 for Limerick. And Tipperary had actually scored 9 out of those 11, whereas 18 for 25 at Limerick, which actually tells you what incredible shooting considering the conditions that were down there. Because it was a dog of a day, it was rotten. Some of the Ducks had even quit. But Limerick had 8 scorers to Tipperary's 4 in that first half. And by the end of the game, this kind of really rams at home. Limerick had created 40 opportunities, scoring 26. Tipperary had just 26 opportunities, scoring 19. Even if Brian Hogan hadn't to make such good saves towards the latter end of the game, Tipperary would have been beaten by far more.
They would have been beaten out the gate. It wasn't the same case in the Munster final last year as well. He was one of their best players in the Munster final. It's just their use of the ball and how economical they are. They will create more chances than any team they play against. And providing they're not putting up 15 or 16 wides, they're going to be very, very hard beaten. I still wouldn't be writing off Tipp. I still wouldn't be writing off Tipp in the back door. Definitely not. I think they'll regroup. They have a bit of time now with the way the draws after working out. Probably for Paddy Matter to get back, for Seamus Kennedy to get back. I'd still fancy them. I'd probably fancy them against anyone in that qualifier draw. Being honest with you, I definitely on their day anyway. So I expect them to come through that. And I'd love to see them play. I'd love to see them meet Limerick again and just seeing what changes that they would make. As you say, it probably shouldn't take a defeat for them to learn as much as they seem to have had over the last number of years. But it'd be very, very interesting. Like, should Brendan Matter not just be picking up Aaron Gallan after last year's Munster final? Does that not just stand to reason now that if he's able to quiet one of the best defenders in the country, that he would go back on him? So I'd be expecting a lot of different positional changes and a different kind of maybe mentality as well with regards to the type of players that they put out. But at the moment, you'd have to say Limerick are strong favourites for the All-Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, the fact that David Dempsey was such a late sub coming in 69th minute, I think he might have picked up a knock recently, but that they can hold him till the 69th minute, that Seamus Flanagan can come in and do so much damage in 11 minutes. Pat Ryan looks like he was putting Tipperary under pressure at one stage. David Reedy, he's the first sub on. They have so much depth there, and to be fair to Aaron Gillan, he did do good and do well enough in that Munster final last year. But anyone in that Tipperary backline that might be able to keep with him, it's possibly Brendan. But then of course you have the issue with that half-hour line with Hegarty, Lynch as it was yesterday, and Tom Morrissey. There's so much flexibility in that Limerick team. It's exceptional. Will O'Donoghue, should he have got a red card at the start of the second half for his swipe? Now he's been held back by Alan Flynn and he swiped, but it did connect with the helmet of Noel McGrath.
Yeah, there's a couple of different incidents over the weekend that we'll go into. I think the fact that fans aren't there probably helps in many ways. When there's a flashpoint and someone sees it and there's a noise and there's a ruckus and all of a sudden the fans are almost closing in on the referee and he has to make a decision. Austin Gleeson easily probably could have walked. I'm not a fan of that. He swiped back. He gave the hand of the hurl to Seamus Hardy. I don't mind that type of thing because you're used to it down through the years. But technically, it is a red card. But we haven't really seen anything like that since the Winter Championship started. Really, any kind of sendings off for things like that. Possibly because I suppose the linesman, maybe there's not as many eyes there, there's not as much noise there as well, but I don't think it would have made any difference, Shane, honestly, even if he had been, just because they were so on top everywhere.
Yeah, and I think Tipperary would accept that there was probably a few frees that went Tipperary's way.
Without a doubt.
A lot of people were upset online. I also think that that situation with Noel McGrath, where he clearly picked the ball up off the ground, and then, to be fair, if you take that out of the situation, the fact that he was on the ground and managed to pop a hand pass over his head for his brother John to go through and score a goal, that was pretty exceptional stuff. But that's
Shane, you have to as well. I always respect things like that, and lads taking advantage of a situation. He was under pressure. He wasn't going to try and pick it up. It was there. He picked it up and threw it on. And if maybe I'm wrong, but if you get away with it, it's not against the rules.
Yeah, and then when there was a bit of a delay after that, obviously there was a lot of conversations going on between the referee and his officials. I sort of tweeted, is the referee getting word from above on this? But Shane Hines, a referee, tweeted, definitely need for a TMO now. RTE cameras capture most incidents and need to assist refs in critical decisions. Could have gone against Limerick again today as it did in last year's semi-final. Obviously that Darragh O'Donovan sideline that should have been a 65. Anything that helps is welcome. And then Twice as Nice 97 said, no way, how can people be looking at VAR and then wanting the same SH1T in a more physical, faster game is beyond me. And Hines says, not VAR, a TMO, where another ref can assist the game ref regarding critical match decisions. All it requires is 15 to 20 seconds. My issue there would be, I find that the Premier League and soccer in a general sense has been fairly ruined by VAR. I think you just have to more or less go with what happens on field. It's too fast a game. The tackles are too open to interpretation. If you were to throw in VAR, it would be an absolute nightmare. If it was something like score detection technology, as we had with the Hawkeye last year, but still in all, when Brian Hogan was catching that Lee Chin free from over the crossbar, was it detecting his hand or was it detecting the ball? That needs to be ironed out. But just in an overall sense, I don't think we need a TMO.
No, and I think the chip that's going to be in the ball, I think over the next year or two, I'd say, will massively help that, particularly to do with scores. You just can't be stopping the game every 15 or 20 seconds, because there's going to be things that happen to how fast the game happens now. You could end up stopping it every 5 minutes if you wanted to. But there was you could stop it every 5 minutes, but there was no stopping Limerick yesterday, and they're gonna be hard beat. Be hard beat.
I'm not saying that Tipp would have come back late on. No matter what happens, Limerick were always winning that game from the first 10 minutes. But I thought it was a strange one. On his own 65, on the 58th minute, now at this stage, there was just 6 points between them. Tipperary somehow were only 6 points behind. But from his own 65, Noel McGrath took a free and dropped it short. But he was going for a point. And considering Ford had knocked one over, I think, from even further, I just thought it was unusual that he didn't go out and take it. But forwards like Ford, Mark Keogh, John Bubbles O'Dwyer, who came in, a lot of these lads are going to need to step up in a big way. Niall O'Mara is a player I've huge time for. I think Tipperary need more out of him as well. But that was a complete non-performance from Tipperary, and it's going to take an awful lot to come back from that. But maybe they can do. I think we've it all said on that. I'm delighted to not talk about it anymore.
And we talked about it for long enough, to be fair. I was like happy enough.
Yeah. You got your pound of flesh there. We'll jump to Saturday's games at Croke Park first of all. The Leinster semi-final between Kilkenny and Dublin it really was a Jekyll and Hyde performance from both teams, because Kilkenny ended up winning 320 to 222, but they went 16 points ahead early on in the second half, and I was looking at it through my fingers. I mean, obviously, I want the Dublin hurling team to do pretty well, having played up here for 10 years. A couple of the lads out there, my club mates, and Matty Kenny, of course, being former manager, I wanted to see them do well, but when it was 3-14 to 7 points after 43 minutes, it was nightmarish viewing. But somehow, for Dublin to go on a run and to get back level towards the very end of the game, Dara Gray in injury time, he made it 221 to 318. And then was it just that little bit, before we go into the mini collapses of both teams, was it just that white line fever for Dublin at the end? Sometimes you do so much work to get back into the game that when you finally do there, I think subconsciously the whole team goes, okay, we finally got back level, and then the other team picks it up.
I'm not sure if it was, to be fair. You had Hugh Lawler bursting out with a ball, and you probably don't expect Hugh Lawler to put the ball over the bar. As well as that, Shane, I couldn't believe it. Even I looked back at the game after. TJ missing a free from out on the 65. I couldn't believe it. He actually dropped it short, which is so uncharacteristic for him. He missed a really, really long range free in the first half, but he dropped a free short when they were level, and you're just thinking, this is the perfect storm for Dublin to come back. I don't think it was white line fever. Interesting enough, I was chatting to one of my friends over the weekend, and I told him,
you have a friend?
I reckon. Yeah, just one or two people that put up with me. And I told him I thought there was going to be a lot of draws. And I said, I identified Antrim and Carlow, and I identified the two games in Leinster I thought would be tight, and Waterford and Cork. So he done various little doubles, €2 and €3 draw doubles. So he was waiting for €3. He was waiting for 330 quid for Dublin and Kilkenny if it had been level. And he didn't realise he was offered a cash out of 200 when they went level on the 70th minute, which he would have taken their hand off, I'd say, for it. But it was, I tell you what, Trolley or Dillon, in fairness to him, he literally, I would say, single-handedly nearly brought Dublin back into the game. He was, from the minute he came on, you could see him, just looking back on the footage after, he was kind of snarling the whole way once he came on, obviously upset that he hadn't started, and he was unmarkable once he came in. He obviously scored, I think he scored 3 or 4, but he won 3 or 4 frees as well. And they did no answer for him whatsoever.
He was class. Now, I played in a team against him twice this year in the Dublin B Club Championship, and his pace is incredible. Now, and if you can lock him down, you go an awful long way towards beating Dublin. But I always want to bat for Matty Kenny when I can, because I haven't played with him. But the setup just did not work for me. Owen O'Donnell had to go on TJ Reid. Now, beforehand I was all about Owen O'Donnell goes on Colin Fennelly, and then obviously out the field Dara Gray would go on TJ Reid. So I can't necessarily say I had it called perfectly. But what I will say,
but you didn't know he was going in full forward. In fairness, it made perfect sense for O'Donnell to pick up Reid when he went full forward.
Well, obviously you have to think through all eventualities and decide if X goes here, Y goes there, and so on. But James Madden, who's been really good in the Dublin Championship and marked Conor Callaghan quite well in that county final, he was not the right matchup for TJ Reid if you're going for sort of a man-on-man situation back there, because TJ Reid is arguably one of the most powerful players I would actually say Conor Whelan might be the strongest. We'll come back to that in a while. But TJ Reid is such a powerful figure. If the ball is on the ground between you and him, he nearly wins that no matter who he's against in the entire country. So if he can hold you off, if it's the awkwardness of even facing a lefty is brought into the situation when you're trying to mark this guy, if he's better hurler than pretty much everybody, if he's better in the air and he's bigger than you, it just didn't make sense to me. I think Dara Gray was someone that I thought that they might try if he was going to be out at centre forward, because he's a big guy, he's fast, he's strong. Obviously his hurling is nowhere near as good as TJ Reid's, but I thought that might have made somewhat, a little bit more sense, and he ended up on Walter Walsh, which to be fair made sense too. So I kind of agreed with that matchup, even though Wally Walsh scored 2 in the first half. But as soon as Dublin decided, okay, let's put Owen O'Donnell back on TJ Reid, TJ Reid's influence was quieter. Now, at the same time, it's not like there was no influence, because He'd set up the 2 goals in the first half. He'd scored one, and at the start of the second half, he did a beautiful little flick to set up Wally Walsh for that goal chance. And actually, for a point at the very end that Alan Murphy scored, it was his beautiful little flick out the side that allowed Murphy to do it. So TJ Reid is man of the match no matter what happens. But you can't have him, setting up goal chances time after time. And they watched it on the line for far too long. You needed to react quicker. You needed to get a sweeper back there. Just like Clare in that All-Ireland semi-final against Galway a couple of years ago. You needed to realise quickly, right, let's get Galvin back here because we're under so much bother. And then to start with a full forward line that doesn't have a scoring threat. Like Liam Rush is clearly not right. I mean, I'm sure they were trying to get him back and they were thinking of Nolan Park last year. He'll catch a few balls close to goal and we'll have them in bother. But he wasn't able to do what he could normally do when he's at his best. Davy Keogh is a good player, but I'd more have him out around the middle third. He's not a scoring threat on the inside line. So you've got a forward line that doesn't have scoring threat, and you've got a back line that's left wide open with matchups that don't really make sense. It's probably not a massive shock that you get exposed.
No, it was very, very strange. And as you said, I suppose the big surprising thing was that they didn't try and stem the blood loss when you could see it coming. Like, it all happened. Fair enough, the 2 goals were within a minute or whatever. But stem the blood loss until half time and try and keep yourself in the game. Just on this as well, has it ever happened? Can you remember a game where Kilkenny have blown a lead like this before?
No, this is the thing.
No. Usually, once they gut you, and they continue to gut you. And if they can beat you by 15 or 16, as was this case, they were up by 16, they'll beat you by about 25. Very, very strange from that point of view. Kieran Wallace was going grand at cornerback, and then all of a sudden, Trollier and Ronan Hayes came in, gave them all sorts of trouble. Conor Delaney was going grand in there as well, and then he was kind of moved over on Trollier, and Trollier was very dangerous on him too. So, like, as Brian Cody said to you after in the press conference, like, what's an accurate reflection on Kilkenny? Is it that brilliant first half, or is it a collapse of a second half? And he definitely has a stick to beat them with over the next 2 weeks. But there's definitely probably a lot of worries there as well for them going into the next couple of weeks. Funny enough, like the likes of Billy Ryan shows some lovely flashes. Probably not too dissimilar to his Greg Ballycallan teammate Eddie Brennan back in the day. You'd see flashes and then maybe there's not the consistency that you want to see. Now, Eddie obviously got that consistency and turned into one of the best forwards in the game. So it'll be interesting to see if Billy can get more consistent. He does. I think he was probably taken off as well because he was on a yellow and had fouled a couple of times as well. So they might have been afraid that he might end up on the sideline pretty quickly after. Owen Cody, yeah, quite quiet enough on his debut. We talked about it as well. Killian Buckley is a better halfback than midfield. He started back, wing back. I'm still not 100% sure on Paddy Deegan, maybe around centre back as well. So Cody is a lot of, I'd say 50 minutes in, he's zipping his lips. By the 75th minute, I'd say his tongue was out and he was a very, very relieved man. And he's not sure where they are now.
Yeah, this is the thing, because he but at the same time, I think the fact that Dublin came back and they got out alive, it allows him to analyse his team and think, okay, does this really work? Is this half back line really physically powerful enough to compete with the likes of Galway and Limerick? Porrick Walsh, Paddy Deegan and Killian Buckley were back there. But I don't know, is that the way going forward? We sort of flagged it beforehand that is the dominance there. And it all looked rosy in the garden in that first half. And you talked about the forward line and who was contributing. Yeah, Billy Ryan was. Colin Fennelly got his goal, even though Owen O'Donnell took his pound of flesh along the way. Owen Cody had a decent first half. John Donnelly was okay in both halves. But when you took TJ Reid out of it, or once you curbed him somewhat, I think you've got to ask yourself, is there an All-Ireland challenger in that Kilkenny team if a team can find a way to limit TJ Reid?
Yeah, well, listen, I suppose he wasn't unbelievably influential in the All-Ireland quarter-final last year. He obviously was in the semi-final, and they're still able to win, we'll say, against Cork in that quarter-final. But you'd imagine he just is so central.
Cork or Cork now.
Yeah, okay. He's just central to everything. That's why it's so surprising that they just said Dublin didn't really go after that. I'm not saying it's like Tony Kelly down in Clare, but you know that if you can curb his influence, keep him to a 7 out of 10, you have such a great chance of winning a game. That was obviously their first time out as well. Maybe, I don't know if it was a lack of fitness or lack of match fitness, maybe, that they faded in those last few minutes, and Dublin kind of came on at that time. But yeah, Cody's in a funny position. Do you ring the changes based on the last 20 minutes, or do you kind of stick with what you had? I'd be very surprised if Joey Holland doesn't come in defence. I know he only came on. I think he popped his shoulder a couple of weeks ago. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come in at either cornerback or wing back, because they know what they're going to get out of him, particularly against, they're going to come up. We're obviously not going to preview the game too much, but they're coming up. Their cornerbacks are going to come up against, Conor Wheel and Brian Concannon, their full back line. So it's going to be very, very interesting in the Leinster final. But yeah, a lot of questions over Kilkenny. Probably meaning, if things had stayed going as they were from the 50th minute onwards, they probably would have won by 10 or 15 points, and the Leinster final would be seen as maybe more of a 50-50 game. But Galway are probably going to be raging half favourites going in now.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Donald Burke was being marked by Paddy Deegan, so you had Killian Buckley back there. So there was obviously a bit of a rejig, and that isn't exactly. I talked about the Kilkenny half back line. There was obviously little tweaks on that. But I think the way Hugh Lawler was burned by Ronan Hayes, that'll definitely be of concern, because we know Hugh Lawler is the fullback, the common fullback, or the present fullback now for Kilkenny, and someone they want to build on for a number of years. But he had a couple of tough moments. Kieran Wallace has had his good and bad moments, but of course they were under so much pressure. It's probably not a huge shock that you're going to be able to point to instances where this lad or that lad was under pressure. Dara Spain tweeted, wrong team and set up, Burke into sweeper and 3 natural forwards on. TJ and Fennelly set up for Dublin at the start was naive. Pat Nolan tweeted, just Brian Cody's third 1 point victory in Championship hurling in his 22nd season in charge of Kilkenny. The first was Wexford in 2018, the second versus Limerick last year. Any other final thoughts on this?
No, you're just you're a bit in the dark about Kilkenny now, and we're going to learn an awful lot in the Leinster final. They're going to come up against a Galway side who were flying the other night. But yeah, I'd imagine Cody would have been spitting fire. Imagine they'd been beaten in that game. Like I just said, I've never seen Kilkenny do that before. They're the most ruthless team usually, and when they get a pound of flesh like that, they will absolutely go to town on you. It's very, very strange to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I will obviously go on and talk about Galway now, but I think it's going to be very difficult to see how Kilkenny win in All-Ireland. I honestly do at this stage, and I didn't necessarily fancy them before the championship, but it's going to be. I mean, if you can tie down TJ Reid, they just look an awful lot more fallible than they did in the past, and I think the aura has certainly gone. And if you go back to second halves in the last couple of years, 2016 All-Ireland semi-final, they were absolutely annihilated by Tipperary. The All-Ireland final last year, absolutely annihilated in the second half. The semi-final against Limerick, completely under the cosh in the second half. Now, I know they turned the screw on Cork in the second half last year, so that's obviously the flip side of it. But it used to be a thing that Kilkenny come out after the break and they pulverise you. That they get those scores, that they, as Enda McAvoy wrote in the Examiner the other day, it's sort of like the double pop of the assassin, 1 goal to the head and 1 to the chest just to make sure of it. But it doesn't. I don't know if that's there anymore. I don't feel that that's there anymore. So I mean, it's not like Cody has the bench that he used to have. Even bringing on Richie Hogan, he missed 2 simple points. It was strange. Conor Brown came on, hit a bad wide. Martin Keown didn't necessarily change things. Alan Murphy did get a score, to be fair to him. I mean, I'm surprised young Tommy Walsh hasn't been playing, but again, it's not that the full.
But easily start the Leinster final yet, Shane, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would it be inconceivable for Cody to throw in a couple of new defenders? Definitely not.
I'm not sure that Richie Hogan will get his chance again after missing a couple of what you would normally consider for him to be very simple chances.
Yeah, they were a bit like nuts to a monkey, as Cyril Farrell would say, usually to him, and that would have just. It just left the door open for Dublin, and that would have closed it. So, yeah, it's funny to see an all-star like Jerry Elmer's not getting any game time at all. He could see maybe game time the next day. And Richie, I still think he'll keep faith with him. And that was obviously his first game back in Croker since the All-Ireland final last year, where he was sent off as well. So his last 2 games in Croker probably don't have great memories for him. But just on what you're saying as well, it's funny, Kilkenny are coming into the Leinster final now, and they're going to be underdogs. Last time they played Galway in the Leinster final as underdogs, they should have beaten them that time they drew in a goalless Leinster final 2 years ago. And they definitely want to be losing, they'll be losing 3 Leinster finals in a row if they lose in 2 weeks' time as well. I think it's on the Saturday evening as well. Definitely it'd be an interesting game. Like we'd all be looking at Kilkenny probably a lot differently if they just maintained that lead and won by 15 or 16 points. Now they're probably going to be big underdogs going in.
Yeah, it perhaps exposed the fallibility that may be there, but we'll find that out. Galway, they look to be back to themselves after a 127 to 17 points win over Wexford. Now beforehand, I'd been feeling fairly sweet on Wexford, on Galway this year. I thought that there was a serious team in them. What we saw during the league from Shane O'Neill, it just seemed like he put a bit of fire back into the belly. Now last year you can look at it and say 2019 they flopped out of the Leinster Championship, but there was a puck of a ball between going through and not, and they didn't have Joe Canning for a lot of that Leinster Championship bar the last 20 minutes. They had one down in Nolan Park, so it's not like all of a sudden they become a bad team overnight, but they were fearsome against Wexford, weren't they?
They were brilliant in fairness, and you kind of knew early on. Like Brian Kincannon is after turning into the sort of forward that they need now. He looks like he's a lethal forward now. He's after bulking up an awful lot. He got maybe he got 4 or 5 chances at goal and he tucked away all of them. He had Simon Donoghue on the back foot from the very, very start. And when you have him and Whelan inside and they're both kind of flying like that, like Jesus Whelan. Like, have you ever seen anything like a block like him? He's so hard to handle. If he gets the ball, forget about it. You're not going to be able to stop him. He's so dangerous. He probably would have had that goal in the first half if it hadn't been blown back as well. He did have the goal because it was in the back of the net. And that's just the fact that they have guys outside of Canning now. Canning was much less influential. He was good in the second half and snapped a couple of puck outs. But the fact that other guys can step up now and they can still put big scores and look really, really dangerous is definitely very promising for them.
I would say Brian Kincannon reminds me of Alan Cadigan. Do you know the go heck of him, the little turn of pace, the fact that he can upset a back? He looks like the real deal. And we did mark that out during the league, especially that game against Tipperary. He looked really, really good. Conor Whelan, to me, is maybe Lee Chin, maybe TJ Reid, but I think he's possibly the most powerful forward in the game. I think he is the most powerful player in the entire game at this stage. And he reminds me a little bit of TJ Reid in some ways. Not the creativity, maybe not just yet, and maybe that will come in time because he's still early to mid-20s at most. But the way he's able, like if there's a ruck ball and if there's 2 or 3 lads hanging out of him, you're fairly sure he's going to come out with it anyway, even if he shouldn't. Because whatever it was, he did that so many times. Even go back and just watch the highlights of the game. You can see him doing it on a couple of occasions. But once he turns and gets the legs pumping at all, he just walks away from you. There was one stage in that first half where he turned and he arced past Paddy Foley. Now, they were out in the open country, but once Conor Whelan gets going, he is off to the races. He is thrilling to watch. And if let's say I'm watching Tipperary against him and I see him getting the ball, it's head in the hand straight away because you just know so few players can stop this guy.
Yeah, and just on that as well, you're talking about like who matches up well with Limerick physically. Like Galway are probably the one team, a team of giants. Like Brian Kincannon's not obviously unbelievably big, but he's so fast. You know, Joseph Cooney, the Manions. You're obviously probably going to have Dahi Burke now as well. Fintan Burke was very good the other night. Looked like he picked up a bit of a shoulder injury. From looking at it, I'd be worried that it could be.
We asked Shane O'Neill. We asked Shane O'Neill afterwards, and at that stage he hadn't seen it, so they clearly know the situation at this stage. But Fintan Burke, obviously, I've had a couple of words in the past saying about how he makes too much of tackles and stays down and all that kind of stuff. But he was really good. Credit where it's due, and Galway have definitely found a really good back there. And it's not like we didn't know. We knew from a couple of years ago this lad is going to be the real deal. And yeah, just a couple of those catches were really, really excellent, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, yeah. And like you have the Porrick man out the middle of the field as well, who's capable of scoring from 100 yards if they get the ball to him. Cotton Mannion, I don't think he scored the other night, but he's capable of scoring 5 or 6 in a given day as well. So they know they're quite similar to Limerick in many ways. They can kill you in a lot of different areas, and everybody can chip in with a couple of scores. McInerney was good full back. Be interesting to see if Dahi Burke is fit. Unless Fintan Burke is injured, like, do they change their defence much? I'm not so sure. Even Shane Cooney played a good bit of the game cornerback the other night, and Aidan Hart was out wing back, and they were kind of switching there as well. But thought he was brilliant. Even Conor Cooney, who we normally know as an inside forward, he was a forager the other day. He was just working up and down the line, working unbelievably hard.
And this is the thing, I thought that Galway had basically picked a team with 4 inside forwards with Conor Cooney, Brian Kincannon, Conor Whelan and Jason Flynn. I actually just wondered, is there going to be a good balance to this team? But they were. Like, Shane O'Neill has got this team motoring, and very, very quickly. Because, you can say, like a team in its first game out, are they fully firing and all that? Do they need a couple of more games? This is Shane O'Neill's first championship match. And Galway didn't just beat Wexford. They absolutely ground them into the turf.
Yeah, no, they hammered them. Yeah, there's no point in saying any different. From a Wexford point of view, I typed Davy Fitz into Twitter the other night just to see what kind of people were saying, and some of the nonsense that comes out now. Fair enough, they were absolutely annihilated the other night. People saying Wexford should just play normal, revert to 15 on 15, which I just think is a bit mad. Like, could people totally lose any sense of like what's brought them to the dance? Like, this is, playing like this has brought them to where they are, brought them to a Leinster title. We mentioned about matchups and styles making fights. Wexford just cannot deal with Galway at all. They cannot deal with them. They've been beaten 3 out of the last 4 times they've met. Last year was a draw, and obviously Joe Canning was missing for that game as well. And as we kind of mentioned in the preview, it's more about containment when Wexford play Galway, because I think they feel they can hurt them in so many areas. And they were just at sea. They were at sea. It was a really, really disappointing Wexford performance. People would have said there would have been a train of thought that the Wexford Hurling Championship was played early so that Davy could get his players early, and that they were going to have loads of training done, more training done than other teams. I don't know. They looked very, very flat the other night. And Davy's comments, I'm sure, which you will go into, were interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I'm just going to play a little bit of it here, and we can. I'll just stop it at some stage. I haven't necessarily planned how much we'll listen, but we'll listen to a little bit, and then we'll kind of have a chat on the back.
I've been with Wexford. We didn't fight. We threw in the power. That's the bottom line. And I have to apologise to the Wexford people, because we're not like that, and we let them down today. We didn't perform, and we hold our hands up because we were absolutely terrible. We were shocking. And any team you go out over, you want them to fight and do whatever. We didn't do it today, and that's not good enough as far as I'm concerned.
Why was that, Davy? What do you think the difference was? Was there any difference in preparation, or can you put your finger on it yet?
I'd love to tell you. I don't know why that was. Like the first 20 minutes we were in it, we probably had 2 or 3 goal chances. We retaliated when we shouldn't have retaliated. But they're small things. As the game went on, they won the 50-50 battles more. And the thing that's most annoying for me is we didn't push in the last 15 or 20 minutes. We put up the white flag and we just saw the game out, and that is very disappointing. There's no point hiding when you have a performance like that. You man up and you say it as it is, and that's how we were, and that's it in the story.
You must be surprised by it, though.
Nothing surprises me in hurling. This happens. I've said it a long time. I suppose I've been lucky enough in 3 and a bit years that 99% of our performances are 110%. You don't like getting one on the Leinster Championship night like tonight, but not good enough.
It's a test of character now, how they bounce back from this, isn't it?
Actually, listen, there's other teams who've got the same thing. I think Tipperary got beaten in the Munster final last year pretty well. I'm not really worried what the result is the next day. What I'll be worried about, will we come out and will we fucking fight? That's the fucking name of the game. I'm involved in hurling to compete. I'm not involved in fucking hurling to just go out there, put up the white flag and hang Galway a game like we did tonight. It's absolutely horrendous, and I'm not happy with it.
What do you think of that?
I thought you were gonna cut it off before all the F-bombs there at one stage. I was waiting for the F-bombs. To be honest with you, I think it's very honest. I think it's very, very honest from him. There's some people saying he threw the players under the bus. I don't think that at all. I'm sure it's probably a conversation that he's had with the players after. Listen, I've come out. We've taken ownership for that. We were shite, and we've admitted that we were. And I think that's probably the best way to draw the line in the sand, rather than leaving it linger. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you're better off, maybe in some respects, just to deal with it head on. Admit that you were totally off, that you raised the white flag, and try and bounce back. What do you think?
Well, because he didn't name check any particular players, I don't feel he threw anyone under the bus. He couldn't come out and say, look, if the break of the ball had to go a different way, then maybe this, that and the other. No, his team was absolutely smothered throughout the entire game. They were never in it. They were always under the cosh. Like they were. What was it? It was.
The only thing I will say, Shane, is they did look dangerous early. They created a couple of goal chances. They went down the heart of the Galway defence and created a couple of goal chances. They were either fouled or fumbled and didn't get much from it. Kind of like Kilkenny in the early stages of last year's All-Ireland final. And then once Galway kind of cut them out there, they had no options basically.
Yeah, it was 8 points apiece after 22 minutes, but then it was a run of 1-4 to nothing after that. And Matt O'Hanlon, who was man marking Joe Canning, he went forward and he had a goal chance just before half time. And if he had to score that, then you're looking at a far tighter sort of deficit by the interval than it ended up being, which was 6 points. And then obviously Wexford got the next point from a free from Lee Chin. But then from there on out, it was just Galway taking over. And it was real men against boys and it was real held at arm's length. But is Davy Fitz... Is he wrong to kind of talk that passionately and use the F-bombs and sort of basically question the effort level of his players? And is he deflecting? Is he deflecting from his own part in it?
No, I think he's taking responsibility from his own part. I think he'll say to you, I'm the manager of the team. What they do reflects the job that I have done. So no, I don't think that
at all. Did he say that though?
He obviously didn't say that. I think that's fairly, like, he would have taken some good bit of credit for their performances in recent years. I'm sure while he's taking credit, he'll also take criticism when it's due. That really is the first time, I would say, Clare in the All-Ireland quarter final a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, probably the last time where they really didn't show anything. And now we're wondering whether, Wexford are able to put 2 years back to back or not. And that's kind of the big question, how they're going to react now after this.
That's just 7 wins in 17 championship games for Davy Fitz in charge of Wexford. So while they have been talked about as All-Ireland contenders, I think you and I have both said even as recently as last week that they're a little bit behind that top tier. And I'd say a lot of it too comes down to, like, they have 10, 11 really top quality players. And then they have a few lads that it just isn't happening for. And in one-on-one situations, Galway had too many wins. There was too often that, let's say, Conor Whelan could turn and beat his man. And, it's all well and good having a good system, but a system can paper over cracks. It can't kind of cover chasms. And when Brian Concannon is getting away from his man and they're exposed one-on-one, and when Conor Whelan is, and then when you know that Matt O'Hanlon is completely consumed with trying to stop Joe Canning, and someone else is trying to mark someone else, there's just there was too many ways for Galway to beat Wexford, and in a wide open field and on a decent day like we had on Saturday at Croke Park, which was so different to Sunday, it felt almost inevitable with Galway back to themselves that they would win this game. Galway don't have that same level of weaknesses around the field. They've good hurlers everywhere, they've power everywhere, they've speed everywhere.
Yeah, and they didn't let Kevin Foley into the game. They kept the ball away from him. They played the flanks. Like Brian Concannon scored a point out in the touchline, the Hogan in the first half, a great score that went to Hawkeye. A couple of times they were picking up ball, and it was basically one-on-one situations that they had created. So there'd be a hand pass out of defence, and then there'd be a lovely little diagonal delivery. Very, very, very smart. They took Foley's possessions, I say, were probably single figures throughout the game. And from people watching, it was really, really frustrating. Like, Wexford were going down blind alleys a lot of the time. They were trying to solo past their man.
Can I give you a perfect example of that? There was one stage, and I'd say people watching on the telly would be screaming at Diarmuid O'Keefe, but he got the ball on his own end line down by the hill in the corner. And it just seemed obvious now. Turn and just strike it to a player up in maybe the half forward line. But I looked at his options up the field, which I'm sure you couldn't see on TV. There was nobody within 100 yards. He would have had to try and hit an intricate cross-field pass over his entire defence and all the Galway players to try and pick out God knows who, I don't know, because he would have been the equivalent of blindly throwing a ball into a line-out in rugby, because there just would have been hands everywhere and bodies everywhere. He looked up, there was nobody in his half-forward line to hit, there was no one in midfield to hit, there was nobody in the half-back line to hit. And then he had to just end up getting swallowed up in the corner, and eventually I think Galway turned him over. So do you think that the system is kind of showing up issues here? Like Shane O'Neill, I think, is a really good manager. Saw it with Napiershig, I've said that a load of times. But like even David Gilligan tweeted into me, yeah, you'd wonder why Wexford don't revert to their traditional style. Now they seem to have realised that they can compete. They have good players. And
The reason they're competing, Shane, is because of the system. Wexford don't have that same squad depth that other teams have. They don't have that same physicality that would say a Galway or a Limerick have.
But
they don't have a load of forwards. They don't have a load of forwards that are going to kill you like Limerick and Galway have. Yeah. I genuinely do think that you're making up for their deficiencies by playing this way. Now, when it goes wrong, it looks awful, and it looked awful the other night. And some of the passes and their touches were just totally off. But Wexford going back and reverting to playing 15 on 15, having not played 15 on 15 since 2016. I don't think that would work either.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the last 20 minutes here, actually from the water break on to the end of injury time, they scored 2 points, and Rory O'Connor got one, and I think it was a 65 from probably Chin was the other one. I mean, they were so blunted out. And do you think Wexford, it'll take them time to build up after that? They don't have to play a qualifier in the first round, and we'll see who they draw after that. Do you think having a little bit of time to go back and sort of lick their wounds is a good thing?
I don't know. Generally, when Wexford were going well, they were going well. They're not the sort of team that goes from playing really, really poorly to playing really, really well. If you look at 17, they played really well throughout the league and played really well throughout the championship. If you look at 18, they played poorly enough throughout the league and poorly enough in the championship. If you look at 19, they played well in the league and sustained it through the championship.
Are you writing them off?
I think you're going to find it hard to turn it around, to be honest with you. Yeah.
You've written them off.
Written them off as what? As winning the All-Ireland. I can't see them winning the All-Ireland from here anyway. And they're obviously not going to win Leinster. So yes, they'll finish with no silverware this year.
Yeah, Mark Fanning definitely a mistake for that goal. That was important.
Shane, can I just say, why do keepers leave the line? Why does a keeper ever leave the line like that? The ball doesn't even have to touch anybody and it can go into the net. Same in football, can't make any sense of it at all. As one of the boys said to me in a WhatsApp group the other night, if anything, he should be standing behind the line so that he's got more time to react if a shot comes in and then step forward. Makes no sense to me at all. I can never understand that.
The ability of that Galway team in the air as well, compared with Wexford, who have a couple of smaller size profile players and a couple of more limited hurlers. Like you mentioned, Joe Canning catching those balls in the second half, they were really important puckouts to be able to catch. And having guys who can step up and do that is important. Conor Whelan, he'd catch a ball. Joseph Cooney, Conor Cooney's capable of doing it. Pádraig Mannion is still a class hurler. He got 2 points. Shane Cooney's able to catch a ball. He caught a brilliant one at one stage. Jason Flynn has the speed. They've so many physical attributes, and the fact that they can catch balls and it's hard to see Wexford coming back from that and even making an All-Ireland semi-final. I think if they made an All-Ireland semi-final and they performed well in their games from here on out, that would salvage something from the season. But yeah, that's look, it's funny, we're talking about an awful lot of teams that come out of this looking poor enough, and we're basically talking about Limerick and Galway, and we've almost set up that this is the All-Ireland final already, haven't we?
You have. I still think Tipp will be back there.
Yeah. Look, maybe, but I suppose when you feel like you've skin in the game, it's a bit harder to see a comeback from there. The Munster Senior Hurling Championship semi-final that was played on Saturday saw Waterford beat Cork 128 to 124. Crazily, a lot of people thought that Cork were the favourites for this game. I could not see it. I thought Waterford would win, and
apparently, according to some people, it was a shock for Waterford to win as well. A shock.
Like who?
That was the commentary on Sky Sports. It was a shock.
But it just doesn't stand to reason. I mean, that Cork back line, when we saw that Owen Cadigan wasn't named in there, you just wonder.
And when Killian Spillane wasn't named, that was just or Colin Spillane, sorry, when he wasn't named for Cork, the whole thing changed for me. I thought Waterford would edge it anyway, but once he was out, they're literally missing that kind of brute force, that physicality in defence, and they just didn't have that the other day.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking the two manliest men out of the full back line, out of the defence for Cork in Colin Spillane and Owen Cadigan. And it's not like the other players who went in are particularly bad players, but they're just not to that same sort of a level. Look at the forward line that Cork have now. I'll just run through it. Conor Lehane, Shane Kingston, Connery, Harnedy, Patrick Horgan, Alan Cadigan. But you're really looking at Patrick Horgan being the one that's going to step up time after time. Shane Kingston's had a brilliant year, and 4 points from play is not to be dismissed. But he, other than that, it feels like the cupboard is somewhat bare. Is it enough to sort of bridge the gap of this game if you put in Dara Fitzgibbon and the two boys in the back line that we talked about?
No, I don't think so, because it was they were coming up against a different Waterford side, a side that we haven't seen in recent years.
Who were short Porrick Mahoney themselves.
Yeah, and they're short. And like, if you look, they're short. Conor Gleeson and another probably there's guts of 10 players missing from that 2017 All Ireland final. Dara Fives got injured, I think, during the week as well. He was out too. But it looks like a mentality change in Waterford. Obviously, Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavens in particular, and Stephen Frampton there, they've all come in. Waterford were just mad for work everywhere, just absolutely mad for work, getting tackles in everywhere. You Callum Lyons, who we flagged up well in advance of this, coming forward from wing back with 1-2. Tyg de Borca, like the speed of Tyg de Borca.
And he's bulked up, hasn't he? He seems to have bulked up. He's a beast.
He's bulked up big time now. Now, I will say, the caveat with that is Shane Kingston got 4 points off Tyg de Borca. Tyg de Borca. But like Tyg de Borca, the ball he was on, like literally, what were Cork doing? They were just they were pucking the ball down everywhere where you knew he was going to be, even when he would have played a sweeper. It was just madness. Every time they put the ball down, that red helmet was bombing out with the ball. I found it very, very hard to understand what they were doing. But if you look at, like, what did Waterford need the other day, or what have Waterford needed in recent years for a big performance? They needed, I would say, the 3 pillars to play well, and that's de Borca, Byrne and Gleeson. And the three of them stood up the other day. Jimmy Byrne was at his best again, fleet-footed, flying around the place.
Glorious play.
He was brilliant, and he was just taking the ball on the whole time. You that allied with Conor Prunty being just really, really solid at the back, really, really solid kind of full-back. Shane Fives was under a bit of pressure with Patrick Horgan, but still came out with some balls. Shane McNulty was good too. Obviously, Callum Lyons too. Kevin Moore is just a warrior. So you have all these guys now delivering a bit of consistency. They were consistent across, the 75 minutes, and it was a big performance for Waterford. They hit a lot of wides while being on top in the second quarter, and it looked like it might hurt them, but they just kept going, and probably the scoreline probably flattered Cork in the end, if anything.
Yeah, 3 points for Austin Gleeson, 3 for Desi Hutchinson, and it just feels like they're building something there. Whether it'll be enough against Limerick is another thing, but even Liam Cahill was asked after the game about his team not hitting a wide in the second half after hitting 14 in the first half, and he goes, work rate was one of the most pleasing aspects of it, but I thought our use of the ball was really good. When Stephen O'Keefe came deep towards the end of the game, his distribution was excellent. There was a nice feel to it. There was an energy on the field, and when there's energy on the field, you always have a chance. That's the sound of a manager who feels his team are in the right place.
Oh, 100%. I think you meant Stephen Bennett there. Stephen Bennett came out wing forward, he was outstanding. Do you know when you look at a team sheet and scores and you say Stephen Bennett 12 points, and you're thinking, he didn't do much from play or whatever. He was outstanding from play. He was brilliant. He's a real link man. He actually controlled the ball in the second half, and it was Owen Kelly-esque, Tipp Owen Kelly, the time he controlled that puck out against Limerick and put it over the bar. Just lightning touch. He's such a good creator as well. He came out wing forward and he just gives in lovely ball because he knows what type of ball they want inside. He was brilliant as well. They had loads of energy. They burnt Cork several times. Yeah. Absolutely burnt them down that spine of their defence. And listen, I don't think there'll be a match for Limerick. I don't think they have the same, calibre of players as Limerick. But will they put it up to them work-wise? Yes, I think they will, and that's probably the most important thing. I think because they raised the white flag a few times in recent years, most notably probably against Limerick last year in Walsh Park. I don't think that'll happen with this team.
Yeah, and Kieran Kingston said afterwards of Cork, I said beforehand that I didn't really know where we stood, but today we didn't bring the performance from training. The way we were going in training, we didn't bring it to the pitch today. Over the course of the 70-odd minutes, I think that we didn't deserve to win the game, and he can certainly say that again. 24 hours after the centenary of the birth of Christy Ring, what an insult to his memory that performance is, and Cork have a long way to go. Much like a lot of these teams, Tipperary were terrible, Wexford were terrible, so were Cork terrible as well. We'll go on to the
just quickly, Shane. Like to sum it up, Waterford had warriors, Cork didn't, and that is it. They did a load of lovely touches, lovely style and stuff like that. When they needed lads to really, really get stuck in, they just didn't have them. I think Aidan Walsh was injured, and he would have played a crucial part. He was injured. I think he failed the fitness test beforehand, and Colin Spillane, and as you said, Owen Cadigan as well. Speed and enthusiasm and energy is one thing, But geez, sometimes it's hard bait, that bit of kind of ignorance and a bit of experience, and they were kind of missing that kind of brute force and physicality on Saturday. It was just really, really disappointing performance from them.
Yeah, that's 4 players over 6 foot and that are all in good nick. So if Cork can get them all back on the field, who knows? You never know, because that game against Dublin in the qualifiers, that'll certainly be a tasty one. The Joe McDonagh round 2, Kerry beat Westmeath 219 to 14 points. Westmeath had lost Niall O'Brien after 40 minutes, and it kind of fell apart from there on out. So a good win for Kerry.
Oh, massive win, yeah. Shane Conway, I think, hit 112. I think it was very, very tight until Niall O'Brien got dismissed. But, geez, this is a fair kind of not a fall from grace, but Westmeath played Division 1 hurling this year.
Yeah.
And, they're playing up at the top table, loads of exposure to it. And, I think they're as good as out of the Joe McDonagh now, because they've lost Antrim. So if it comes back to a head-to-head, they'll be in trouble there. They're going to have to win their last 2 games to have any chance. But they've shipped 2 really, really big beatings and shipped heavy scores to both Kerry and Antrim. So it's very, very hard to see them turn it around. And as we said, despite having like Shane O'Brien as a star-studded backroom team there, Alan Kearns, Noah Larkin, Alan Budamangan involved there as well. But they lost Killian Doyle. He's gone over to London, and we'll actually talk about him in a second because he's playing with Gabriel's in London. But they're in bother. They're beating finalists the first 2 years of the Joe McDonagh Cup, the last 2 years, and they look like they're in big trouble. And just in the other game, Antrim kind of continued what's been a really good turnaround in the last year, in particular under Darren Gleeson. Grabbed the draw. I'm sure you probably saw the video that's going around that Buff Egan had of the draw and goal at the very, very end. Big Donald Nugent, who we talked about earlier on this year, who got those couple of goals with only one arm in a club game earlier on this year, he came good for them again. And that's a brilliant result for them, because Carlo obviously coming back down from the top table. This is they're probably the barometer that everybody's going to be measuring themselves against, and it's a massive, massive result for Antrim. From a Carlo point of view, they probably would have been expecting to win, but they were missing James Doyle and Alfie Cork, and they're both long-term losses. And Chris Nolan wasn't able to start, but he came on and he was very, very good, I believe. There's been a bit of movement and shaking in the Carlo backroom team. PJ Delaney, who was coach, and Carl Delahunty, who was a selector/coach, they've departed in recent weeks, and Colin Bonner has turned to Martin Byrne from Wexford, who's involved for the last couple of years as coach. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this is a warm-up to their final meeting. They look like to be the 2 best teams. That's maybe not giving Kerry enough credit, but I would imagine that Antrim and Carlo would just about take care of Kerry, and I think that this could be a repeat of the final.
And now that you mentioned St. Gabriel's there, we'll just look at the London results in the club championship over the weekend. Brother Pierce's booked their place in the final, beating Kilburn 112 to 17. And I'm just going to bring it up on screen here that this was St. Gabriel's keeper James Bard. He was the hero, saving a last gasp penalty as Gabriel's beat defending champions Robert Emmets 312 to 212. So here's the save. Right. So that was
a proper save, because it was gone. It was right to the corner. It was a serious save.
Yeah.
I actually took a few sessions with Brother Pierce's when I was living over in England. They obviously weren't going well because I was taking sessions for them, but they've subsequently bounced back. The last final they were in was in 2013, and they're flying a good friend from home there, Conor Kennedy from Sir Kieran. He's been banging in a load of goals for them, so that'll be an interesting final. Gabriel's are actually managed by Neil Rogers, former clubmate of mine as well. He's player manager with the Gabriel, so that'll be an interesting final.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the Christy Ring Cup now. Kildare beat Wicklow 214 to 110. Down beat Derry 113 to 13 points. And just even look at the draw. Derry are going to be against Offaly. Now, they played an All-Ireland quarter-final 20 years ago, you were telling me, and Roscommon are going to be against Sligo. But I think Derry are down an awful lot of players this year. Offaly are going to annihilate them.
Offaly, Derry have a game under their belts, which is a help to them. And
Offaly are going to annihilate them.
Shane, I hope so. I hope so, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. Derry played a Division 2B league final and have played Down the other day again. They were beaten obviously twice by Down, have 2 games under their belt.
But they're down to likes Alan Grant, Micheál McGrath, Jerry Bradley, Brendan Rodgers and Christy McCaig there with the footballers, unless somehow they're going to be drafted back into the hurling team now on a very short turnaround after losing to Armagh. The football, it's going to be tough for Derry.
Well, I hope so, Shane, to be honest with you. I hope so. From our point of view, I definitely hope so. Just on down at another good win against Derry. That's the second time they've beaten them. And even though Derry were going well, but then ended up playing the final 21 minutes with 14 players after Paddy Kelly was sent off. And in the other game there, Jack Sheridan got a goal in either half for Kildare as they beat Wicklow. I thought that'd be a bit tighter. David Slattery actually made his debut for the Kildare Hurlers after spending the last 4 years with the footballers, and I believe his pace inside caused an awful lot of trouble. So those Kildare and Down are both through. They'll await the winners of Derry and Offaly and Roscommon and Sligo in the semi-finals, to the best of my knowledge. And then in the Nicky Rackard, Donegal had a good win over Armagh. Thought this would be much tighter now. It was 3-13 to 1-9 in favour of Donegal. And Declan Coulter, who used to play with Armagh, he was actually missing. He limped out the week before. So, when you're looking at it on paper and thinking they're missing him, you maybe thought they would have struggled a bit. So it was a big result for Donegal, who had Donny Cullen and Davin Flynn back. But Davin Flynn, I think, pulled his hamstring again, so he could be missing for the next day. And in the other game, Mayo 124, Tyrone 9 points. So Donegal and Mayo are through to the semi-finals there. And the round 2B game is the next round of games is Longford versus Leitrim and Monaghan versus Tyrone, with a place in semi-finals up for grabs. And the last game of the weekend was the Lory Matter Cup. Fermanagh 16, Cavan 113. So Fermanagh hit 3 unanswered points to get a draw, and a draw is enough for them to go through to the final. So it's Cavan and Louth in the last round, and the winner will get a final place against Fermanagh.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we nearly have it all said at this stage. We've had a long old show of it.
We've had a lot said, yeah, but a great weekend of games again. A lot of different types of games. But yeah, it's going to be even thicker and faster now through the qualifiers, and it definitely the takeout of the weekend is probably, a lot of people would think Galway and Limerick are on a collision course in the All-Ireland final, repeat of the 2018 final. I still think Tipp will have a big say in things, but interesting. They'll be coming through the back door, but they've showed that they can do that very effectively before. Yeah,
we're in the midst of a hurling bloodbath at the moment, considering all the games we had at the weekend and all the ones we have coming at breakneck speed over the next couple of weeks. And just a reminder there that we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. The Waterford jersey here. Michael Verney's got the Galway jersey there. Go to orgaretro.com, put in the promo code OurGame, and you get 15% off. Thanks very much, Michael.
I'm doing my best impression of Jerry McInerney here. I'm trying to grow the tash and the long hair. I'll have the mullet in a while and have the jersey and all.
Yeah, it basically looks like Lego plug-on hair at this stage. It's getting bigger and bigger.
I've got white boots on down here as well.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, thanks very much.
Cheers, Shane.